the flats.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Craig Bell. He's got quite a collection here, and it's American. Let's see. Let's go over the title of it. It's Patriot Weapons and Accouterments of the American Revolution. He's got some fantastic stuff here, so I've asked him to kind of go through the highlights, and we'll look at what he's got on display here. Take it away, Craig.
Thank you, John. My interest in the American Revolution is primarily weapons that were either carried or made by patriots and their accoutrements. So if it's something of foreign manufacture, it's got to have provenance that was carried by a patriot during the war. So I'll just kind of start here with what I consider some of the highlights are the Rappahannock Forge, which is in Falmouth, Virginia, just outside of present-day Fredericksburg, was the largest ironworks in North America during the 18th century. And they had a contract that made pistols, muskets, rifles, wall guns, and swords, primarily for Virginia units. But very few pieces have survived. This particular piece, I'm going to flip it over, is regimentally marked to the Pulaski Light Dragoons, who was in charge of the dragoons for the Continental Army and the troop. And you'll see it also has some relief carving, which usually would signify something done special for an officer. And this was issued to the 3rd Regiment. There are 3 pistols that have survived the war that are regimentally marked. There are 6 to 7 pistols that have survived from Rappahannock Forge in all existence. This one's in original flint condition. There's only 2 others in original flint condition. So what's unique about this is I'll pull out the other one because I think the markings might be a little bit clear. Rappahannock Forge was owned by John Hunter, James Hunter, so it's maybe hard to see, but it says I Hunter, that's James Hunter. All the locks are marked with Rappa Forge. And again, you know, patterned off of a British musket of the day. But these are very rare and highly sought after if you're a Rev War collector. If we kind of move down here along, I'm learning how to get accouterments, so it's a little new to me, but this is a interesting piece. This is actually from Captain William Paxton. This is his haversack, his scabbard for his bayonet, and his cartridge box. He was a captain in the Rockbridge Militia, which is a county in Virginia, and was with the Virginia Militia, and very prominent family. This came out of the family, and so it's been in the family for almost 226 years before it was acquired. If we move in this case, I tried to get some things that a soldier might have carried. We have bullet molds. These are Josiah Miller bullet molds from Connecticut. You find them dug in Rev War campsites, a ladle. But what I want to show you is the Pistone here. In 1777, Continental Congress passed an order directing General Washington to brand all Continental Service weapons. There were about 300-400 pistols that were branded. I want to show you, this is an American Rev War pistol made in Philadelphia, has a U.S. brand, and you see that. What's unique about this pistol is it's branded U.S. States. We know there was a contract for at least 300 of these made in Philadelphia. Only 4 have survived. This is one. There are 2 others in private hands. Only 4. One is at the Smithsonian, and the other 3 in private hands. 3 of the 4 have these what looks like kind of a scribble. This is actually kind of a script print, and we think it says PNW. We don't know what that means. At first I thought it was an officer's initials, but then we found 3 of the 4 have the same initials. So unless it was a captain or a colonel that would have acquired it for his troops and maybe put them on, we're not sure. This one also has the marking of Philadelphia, so that's why we think it was that Philadelphia contract. Again, there's only 4 of these that have survived, so it's a really unique piece. This is an American Spontoon that was found just outside of Guilford Courthouse, which is the largest battle of the American Revolution in the Southern Campaign. It was just kind of found in property down there, American-made, very simple Spontoon.
You don't mean found on the street?
Not found on the street.
Okay, no. Tell me.
Found in a old house that the family had, and just was kind of ignored, and about 20 years came out of the house.
All right.
I want to point out a couple things on the muskets. because the first thing you're going to look at is saying, well, I thought you said you liked American weapons, and these look like they're French and British. The first two muskets are French. What's unique is that you'll see they're branded United States. This is a model 1763, and it's just a beautiful brand. This is another model 1774, Charleville, United States. Continental Congress again in February 1777 directed.
Go ahead.
Okay, directed the branding. So that's why we know that these were probably branded in the middle of 1777. So the first two muskets, that's what's significant about them. The third and fourth musket are not branded, but what's interesting is we know who owned them and who carried them. This was owned by Private Robert Avery. He was with Captain Stoddard's company in Connecticut. He was killed in the war along with 8 of his brothers. This was in his family. It is a brown-bess, and the British markings were scratched off, which was common with the Patriots, to signify they didn't want to be carrying a British crown. They considered it was confiscated and scratched off those markings. And then to the far right is a 1766 pattern Charleville that was carried by Private Alicia Crosby. And what's unique about this is it has its original bayonet. It's the only known one with its original bayonet. Both of these two muskets were in a very prominent collection that was assembled back in the 1880s. It was in a museum. These have been on display at the Smithsonian for about 35 years. When the company that had loaned it went out of business, and that's when the collection was dissipated, and we were able to keep those two together.
Cool. Okay.
I have a few powder horns. None of these are really fancy. This was a powder horn of a private. He only had 4 days of service, but he responded to the call for the Battle of Concord. And I did a little blow up to try so you could see. It's a very dark horn, but that's what the bottom of this, a priming horn. Priming horn would have the fine powder that would have been used. To the right, I have a pair of horns. These are interesting. These I got these directly. These are from the family. It was this powder horn and a priming horn of Lieutenant Watkins. And James Watkins was the commander of a Virginia sloop called the Patriot in the Virginia Navy during the Revolution. He scratched, we think he scratched, but a ship and a tortoise and his initials on the bottom of the main horn. His initials are also the other horn. And this has been handed down from the family from generation to generation until probably about 6 or 7 years ago.
Okay.
This one I just want to kind of post because it's a little bit different. Nothing fancy. A lot of people don't like dark horns. You can't see anything. But what's unique is on the end. On the end, you actually have the identifying characteristics of who owned it. That has his name, his date. This man was with the Rhode Island Minuteman. And I have a blow up of the bottom there, but it's under glass with pewter. It's all original, and I just love things that are kind of simple like that were carried by a soldier. And then I've got a couple bayonets and some leather, but I really want to kind of point out just a couple things on the swords I have. And if you like Civil War stuff, you're used to really shiny, pretty stuff. When you get into the American Revolution, things tend to be dark, dingy. So at first I was like, well, why would someone want something that's ugly? But once you start studying it, you realize how cool it is. These 3 swords here are called H swords. H because on the knuckle bow is an H that has been pounded in during its manufacture of the hilt. And we think the H stands for James Hunter for Rappahannock Forge. Same one who made the pistols. There are 14 swords that have survived the war that have H that are known to date. These are 3 of them. What you'll notice is that the blades are generally manufactured somewhere else. The hilts were made at Hunter Iron Works and they were assembled at Hunter Iron Works. There was a contract between the Hunter Iron Works and the Commonwealth of Virginia to make 1,000 swords. So we think that this was part of that process back in 1776, 1777. And lastly, I have 2 Virginia, they're French swords made for Virginia use. This is a Grenadier of Virginia sword, engraved Liberty or Death, where the death has been ground off. And on the other side, it says Grenadier of Virginia, and I have a blow up here which shows it a little bit better. And the other is Artillery of Virginia. It's the same thing. Again, it has this one says Victory or Death, Both the blades are made in Klingenthal, which is a portion of, depending what century at, German or French. It went back and forth in that time. It was on the border of Germany and France. Very prominent sword manufacturer. French made for the Virginia troops. And last but not least is a Potter sword. The best article or research on that is an article by Eric Goldstein that was published by Man at Arms about 2-3 years ago. But it was actually made by a loyalist for British troops, but we found that Americans would highly sought after probably one of the better quality made swords during the Revolution by Americans, but was made by a loyalist in New York City. So that's just kind of a thumbnail sketch of some interesting pieces of the American Revolution that are all together for one-time showing.
Thanks, Craig. I'm going to go ahead and pan down this stuff one more time just for the folks out there in, we call it cyberspace, but fantastic collection. Thank you very much for taking us on the narrated tour.
We were done at 10 tanks full crew basically they got a lot.
Now you won the award too, didn't you? The Robert L. Miller Award.
I did. That was
That's right here. We need to look at that. That's a very coveted award within the company military historians. They give one every year, Robert L. Miller Award. So Craig Bell won that this year with this display, and it's a fantastic display. Stuff you just don't see. I mean, you might go to a show and see one or two of these things, but all this stuff assembled in one place. You got to go to a big museum, don't you, to see this? You just don't see it. Now this is Revolutionary War leather.
Yep.
Still intact and nice condition. That's amazing. And even, what do you call this, the cloth, the muslin or what? The straps.
Yep.
The straps are still there.
Yep.
Cartridge box, haversack, which they could carry about anything in, right?
Yep.
And a bayonet scabbard from the Revolution.
Yep.
And then the two fine pistols. Well, that's all, folks.